This meeting is being recorded.
Ah,
Wow, this is the first time I hear that. Do you hear that?
yeah.
What? Right, okay. Thank you for letting us know. Right, so the last part of our research and reflexivities that we've been talking about is the contextual reflexivity. So we're getting there in the sense of we have covered the personal, methodological. What else? I forgot the other one. I can't even remember what the methodological, personal, see?
Interpersonal?
Yeah.
Interpersonal, yes. So the interpersonal and the contextual are very closely linked. Again, I think is about how you express or talk about these types of reflexivity in your assignment. As long as when you're making that choice, you are clear as to what reflexivity you're referring to. And if that's explicit and you're making that very transparent, then, you know, you could also mention that all of these reflexivities are interconnected. They will always be interconnected, but you will focus on X, Y, or Z. The advice of the assignment is to focus on one, because really the second part of the assignment is just 2,000 words. And it's hard sometimes to create a narrative, you know, that covers one aspect of it. But if you're struggling to involve, you know, or develop that one reflexivity, and you feel that you could talk about two that are connected, such as this one, interpersonal and contextual, then you could do that as well. Same questions. What is personal? Why am I showing the personal? No, that should be, see? This is when I start noticing things, but that should be, what is contextual reflexivity? Am I in the right slide? Hold on. No, I'm not even showing you the right slide. Yeah, I was confused, thinking, what's happening? So there you go. Yay, part 4. Yeah, that's the problem of having so many tabs open. Yeah, so that contextual. First question, what is contextual reflexivity? Then how it is expressed in the research journey. And then we have a section on reflexivity as a method, and we have discussed this a bit, but we have a couple of examples of studies that have used reflexivity as a method. And one of those studies involves a methodology that Fred mentioned not long ago, IPA. And IPA is basically a double dimension reflexivity, because it involves different aspects of reflection, not only coming from the participants, but also from the researchers and anyone involved. So it has like layers of reflexivity. And then we'll have a conversation. So basically, the contextual is all about where your study is situated. This is where you tell us as much as you know and can tell us based on literature out there about the research context. A lot of people in the past who have developed a reflective article or piece or chapter, they do describe that the cultural, they go, you know, from the local to the more cultural work environment or cultural society. They do describe it, and then they talk about where their study is situated. And I think that's very important to recognize the situatedness of the study, because it will be shaped by, you know, whatever your research project is, it will be shaped by that context. So the questions then that we can ask when we're thinking about the contextual are, you know, how is this context influencing, transforming my research idea? I had a session last week when we were asking students to think about a topic of interest. And we were also asking them to think about, and I'll bring that presentation here. Oh, didn't go there. Can you see the PowerPoint that I put there? Yeah, okay. So in order to break down that, you know, to help them create a focus for the research project, we did say to them, well, think about a forest, and that forest is your field of study. Think about a tree in the forest. So what area of that field of research are you interested in? Think about a branch. So the branch becomes, so that's the forest there. Think about the, sorry, my mouse is not reacting, I'm telling you. Okay. They were given this example though, international students' experiences. So that is the forest. Then what would be your tree? And that tree is the area related to that forest. So this is when they start, you know, focusing on international student experiences, making friends. Okay, what about that experience that is abroad? Okay, you're interested in how they relate to others. Think about the brand as a specific aspect related to that tree. That's where they start asking themselves questions. But the idea of looking at where the tree is situated in relation to the forest, I think that's what is very, very important when we think about the contextual elements. Because when we get to the leaf, which is the main focus of that specific research project, we do need to see very clearly what the connections are and how the research field, because as you engage with literature, that literature will, and the literature also situated in different contexts, will inform how you situate your own project in that specific part of the world. Sometimes we read literature and the literature is, coming from China, coming from Latin America, because there's no research done in this area that we want to do research in our context, but that doesn't mean that it's not relevant. You could, as you read and analyze all this information, you could start making relationship connections to the context that you know, because you live there, because you have experienced it, because you know about the policy, government, and so on and so forth. And this is where you start then building up that knowledge. So that's one activity we did. And the idea then is to start thinking how that context or different contexts that you have read of influence how you see the position of your study in that specific field. And then we have, in Olmos, there is an example of a study. Let's see if I can show you that example. There you go. That when they have this snapshot of their contextual reflexivity, they're actually reflecting on the question, how are aspects of the context influencing their research and the people involved? Again, very connected to the interpersonal, because we live, we're always in interaction with others. We live in that social world, so it's impossible to separate people who are there from the rest of whatever is the infrastructure around us. And there's people who actually make that context. So I like that snapshot, because they do talk about how the relationships, again, I think this is based on, let me remember, yes, so supervision, clinicians talking to each other, forming groups to have discussions, and they're looking at how these groups and observations that they're taking place are impacting on how clinicians conduct their own supervisions with their own groups. So looking at that relationship, how those how that socialization even changes and helps people to reflect on their own work. So I like the idea. I think in the text it says this is a multi-reflexive project, because as researchers are looking at how people come together and shape each other ideas, then they're also reflecting on what else they can do to improve their own work and those connections that they have in supervision. So that's there a question there for you then to look at. And I would say, how would this kind of, if you were to answer to this question, how is contextual reflexivity expressed in your research project? What kind of answers would you articulate? That's where my interest is for this session. And we will have to go to the pre-tasks, but we'll do that later. There's another example of this research. Can't remember the authors, but again, that's in Walsh's article. And they're studying how anorexia nervosa, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing it right, how is culturally and historically embedded, whether and how is embedded in that cultural and historical context, and how that connects, or if there are any connections with the way in which we live in the world. So what kind of modern life shapes those people that are diagnosed with anorexia? And you have that excerpt there that, in a sense, it captures the relationship between the participants and the people who are conducting the study. So people who are conducting the study, they start the conversation by asking them how they feel by, being interviewed in that specific place where the ward is located. So they're not really coming out of the ward, they're just inside the ward, and they just take into another room, which they probably didn't even see before. And they're there having that interview. And as they start having that conversation of that discourse, how do they feel? They suddenly realize that, well, actually, we're here to stay. You can go free and leave this interview. And if you want us to talk about that, how do we feel? So we have completely different experiences. But they also look at that discourse, that power dynamic that goes within the word, but also they do that to push the participants to then express that, culturally, because again, they're probably be in a hospital, but that hospital has a different culture. People who run this hospital promote a type of culture. So they want to get them to talk about that and those experiences as well. And again, to go back and see the relationship between their diagnosis and the context where people with this diagnosis live, and how that shapes and anything in their health situation. That's a study that is purposefully looking at that contextual element and how that is shaping the participant situation. So far there are 4 types of reflexivity. We know that they're all connected, and your challenge is to choose one of them or 2 that are closely connected, which they all are, but still is how you articulate, how you interweave the connectivity between at least 2 of them. If you want to talk about 2, you need to make that very explicit and guide the reader in a way that any examiner, anyone who's listening, who's reading your narrative, will understand you as the researcher. But you can also focus completely in one of them, so you have autonomy into what you really want to do. my advice is just be purposeful as well. How is this reflective piece? How is, what is the relationship between that reflexivity that you choose and the stage of your research journey? So you could be purposeful as saying, okay, I am in the planning stage, so therefore I am just, I'm going to start from scratch, and I'm going to think about my decisions about, choosing this particular project. So you can start there, or if you are already conducting the research, then you might want to be, purposeful in the sense of, okay, I'm at this stage, what can help me? What kind of reflexivity can I focus on? So to help me to make sense about this stage, make sense of this specific moment of my research journey. I doubt you are in this part, but if you are in this part of the last bit of your research journey, you could also think about, reflecting back on the whole experience. Now, very brief, short activity on the screen. I want you to look at the extract there and think about what type of reflexivity is articulated. So you have a couple of seconds while I drink some water. Any thoughts?
So I'm just like the words that like jump out that you'd like associate with the different reflexivities, like oh, but dialogue between people, so like interpersonal. But then if it's about like discrimination,
Mm.
then it'd be about like contextual. But then also when they're reflecting on their own, in like the evidence in our white and non-white statuses, then that would be personal as well. Like I'm
Yes.
just, yeah.
Yes, that actually this is where they're integrating different types of reflexivity into one very short, brief paragraph. So they're trying to be as precise as possible, and this could be given, the fact that they have limited wording and they're probably reporting on a bigger study. And this is when you could see sometimes in articles and chapters that they have the odd reflexive element, and this is what they're doing in that brief paragraph. But yes, you're right. So this is a collaborative research project, and the authors, the researchers of this project, are trying to communicate their reflexivity in that brief paragraph. But yes, it's a combination of reflexivities, I would say. Any other thoughts? So I think, and this would be a good exercise to go then and visit the study actually, to see how, because they're deciding to say, well, actually, this is a collaborative project with white and non-white people who have this status. So how does that then inform their analysis, for example? I would like to read about that. I don't really know if they have it. I can't remember. I remember reading this a long time ago, but I can't remember if they actually go back to that. Because to me, when somebody is writing a bit of their reflexivity, has to be purposeful. You're saying this because you want to come back to this point. You're saying this because you're showing that there are different perspectives in this collaborative project, and you want to be as transparent as possible as to what is shaping your analysis and your data, basically. Let's move on then. So then we have that more general questions, and this is where I want you as well to think about how these questions that are more general, in the sense of, you know, they want researchers to articulate the reflexivity. My question would be, where would you place them if you were going to embed them in a stage of a reflective model? Because then the activity for your assignment is to choose a reflective model, or you might want to merge two different models of reflection because you find them useful. So in a way, what I'm asking you to do basically is to come up with, first of all, to decide on one of the models, but if you feel that they're not useful for you, then you are creating a model that is informed by other models of reflection. And the idea is that as you are doing this, then you think about where these questions will be presented in that model. And that is part of your assignment number 1, for instance. So questions that you could think of in relation to a model of reflection are: in what way might my experience shape my participation in the project? What experiences have I had with research? What is my orientation to qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method research? What results do I expect to come out of this project? What theories do I intend to favor? What do I hope to get out of it? Those questions, if we think about them, are more the type of questions that you ask when you are in the planning stage. You're trying to get that proposal, you know, write that proposal, start thinking about your research ideas. What are my fears? I would add another question here and potentially ask, okay, what are your fears? But also, how are you planning to, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, when you have fears, but then you do things, you do actions to overcome your fears. What is the word? That happens to me a lot. There you go. So yes, again, this is just food for thought. Where would you place those questions in your reflective spiral? Going back to research outcomes, as we think again about that research journey, I know you're not there. You might be reaching that point probably. So when you think about what the contribution is of your research project, how can you articulate your reflexivity on that stage of your project? That is something that really is almost like not explored in the literature. You know, people, when they reach that stage of, okay, these are my outcomes, this is my recommendations, and they kind of forget to continue that reflexive mode of dimension. But we have mentioned before that even when you're disseminating your data, you know, you're still being reflective as to what specific parts of your study you're presenting to other people. How do you present your data, your project? So in the same sense, when you start talking about your contributions to the project, writing down about your outcomes, how you reflect on the whole learning experience, this is where I would then push people who really want to write about that journey at the end of their that stage of their research journey. My big question would be then, what do you learn through the project? just as a prompt then to get people thinking about the whole process. And more importantly, how is this learning? Is it going to be implemented? How is it informing policy? We go back to the actions, which is why we do research, because we want to have an impact on, on the society, basically. But there are also research projects that are more on the philosophical side of things and really don't get to those stages. Yeah, and we've mentioned this before, dissemination of findings. So when we talk about reflexivity as a method, this is just like a snapshot for you to then, if you're thinking about conducting a different research project, conducting anything that is different from what you're doing now, or you might be conducting already a project that involves reflexivity as a method. These are the kinds of methods that are considered reflexive. So we have ethnographies, we have narrative research, action research, focus group that focuses on participatory research. Photo elicitation is also a reflexive method, and autoethnography. Just for you to keep thinking about these methods. You don't have to utilize them, just becoming aware that they exist, they're there, and you might already be using them, but how you talk about them, and are you acknowledging that these methods are more of a type of interventions for your participants to develop their own reflection skills or reflective skills. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And I'm done with this introduction of the topic. As I said, it was very, very short because it does have that relationship with the interpersonal. But if you have any questions before we move into our group work, I'm happy to take them.
I feel like over like the week, I've been thinking about like the messiness of interpersonal and contextual, especially like my research and stuff. I'm like, and I feel like that just kind of acknowledged that it is messy and context is people and people is relationships and that's interpersonal. So like that like helped to with my understanding because yeah, I'm like it is
How
just
do I
messy, isn't
separate them? Yeah, I
it?
mean, the purpose is not to separate them because they're all connected.
Mm,
I think it's how clear you are in your understanding of that messiness
yeah.
and how transparent you are in making this or articulating this clearly while you write about what you want to write about. So as I said, guiding the reader with your understanding. This is when you, as the person who's writing the assignment, you need to show that you have read literature, that you know these types of reflexivity are connected. So in a way, you're using the same arguments that you have heard about in our sessions. Because one of the things I want to say as well is that I expect to see some of the references that we have seen in class, because you're showing that you understand how these reflexivities are conceptualized, but also how they're connected. And then you can start from the general, then to start to continue to the particular, how you're going to utilize specific terminology to then develop your own plans to articulate your reflexivity and so on and so forth. I think it's just about being clear. Any other questions? I'll stop recording, by the way, just because